for the masses. No other than Mr. Jonathan Barrett. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Jonathan, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, bro. Hey, Jonathan Barrett, based out of the U.S. in Washington D.C. I'm excited to have a conversation with you, man. I do a lot of things. First off, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian podcaster, service member. Do a lot of different like coaching. Have a vast background in different type of coaching. Mostly around wrestling. Grew up wrestling. Trained Brazilian jiu jitsu. Just do a lot of different things, my brother. So I'm excited to have a conversation with you.
Mr. Jonathan Barrett. Thank you so much for sharing your podcast to the world. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So let's talk about
Thank you, my brother.
Yes. So let's talk about the foundation of discipleship. How would you personally define discipleship?
Yeah, bro. I think in the book, the best book, the book that is like a manual for life, for me and like what I believe. But the Bible, Jesus called us all to go forth and make disciples of everyone. And how I really think discipleship, like what that really means is doing life with one another. Really like showing people how I live, showing people how I honor Christ, how I try to be Christ-like as possible, how I treat my wife, how I treat those around me, and how I love. That's what I think discipleship is, just like really doing life together.
Doing life together, indeed. And Mr. Jonathan, what are the key characteristics of true disciple?
There's a lot of characteristics of discipleship. My one of my favorite verses about discipleship would be John 13:34 through 5. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I think in order to disciple any one another, Daniel, after this, if we disciple each other, I hope you know that I love you and that I care about you. And I hope that's like my interaction with everyone, that I love them, that I reflect the love of Christ, no matter what I do. I think that's a huge component. I think that's the component that makes a lot of difference in these relationships. And the reason I think love is so important, because like, hey, if I'm trying to do life with you and we're trying to do this thing together, are you going to trust me if I don't love you? Are you going to trust me if I don't show you that I'm actually doing the things that I say that I'm going to do? Are you going to trust me if I'm like trying to be as Christ like as possible? So definitely love is number one of the characteristics for sure.
Why do you think Jesus placed such a strong emphasis on making disciples?
I think it's important because those Jesus had disciples around him. The apostles, the apostles. He had 12 apostles, but he had an inner circle of three. And I think he played a huge role in it, because that was over thousands and thousands of years ago. But through discipleship, leading with love, it's one of the biggest religions in the world. And I think that's so important, because once you love someone, you can tell them anything you want to tell them. They're open, they're kind, and they're more receptive to the love of Jesus Christ.
Indeed, Mr. Jonathan, indeed. So let's talk about the personal experience and insight. Can you share a moment in your life when discipleship made a major impact on your faith journey?
Oh man, for sure. Like I could talk about my dad. My dad, he's not my biological dad, but from a very young age, my mother was transparent that this isn't like my biological dad, but he was still there for me. And I just knew, hey, this is my godfather, but he showed me love. And I have so many memories of him showing me that love from a young age. I remember him picking me up from daycare. I remember him teaching me how to like groom myself. I remember him teaching me how to dress myself. And and he just loved me like I was his actual son, and that is my dad. So I think that that's just a testament to like the heart that God gave him to be able to show love to someone else's kid. and it drastically transformed the way that I perceive, my relationships, how I do things in life, how I choose to love other people as well.
Very well said, Mr. Jonathan. Very well said.
Thank you, my brother.
You're welcome, Mister. How has your understanding of discipleship evolved over time?
Oh man, so like discipleship, it really causes you to like take a look in the mirror. It really causes you to like really like take a look to see if you're really living a life that you say you live. So if I'm inauthentic and I'm coming to you and I'm saying, hey Daniel, um I can teach you how to do podcasting, and then you look at my podcast and you see I was inconsistent with my posting. If I didn't do a podcast, I said I was going to do one every week and I do one every 2 months, would you trust me at that point, Daniel?
Not really.
Not really, right? Not really. So it really makes you like really like look in the mirror and say, hey, am I doing this life the way that I say that I'm living this life? And so for me, when I come to discipleship, I'm honest, I'm transparent about my struggles, the sins that I'm struggling with, the things that I really 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 need help with. I'm super transparent about it so that they really know that like I'm living this life, and that's what I try to lead with. That's what I try to leave with, Daniel.
What are some challenges you face while discipling others?
So Jesus talks a lot. He has a lot of parables about counting the cost. And what that means is like if you're going to follow Jesus, it comes at a cost, right? What does this look like? A lot of them he told them to like, hey, stop what you're doing and come and follow me. And I think that requires a lot of us. So anytime you're trying to, go and like make disciples of anyone and you're trying to say, hey, this is the way we should do things, via the Bible, via Jesus Christ. My thing is like, hey, I have to be doing these things as well. And sometimes I'm not, Daniel. Sometimes I sin, sometimes I fall, sometimes I stumble, but I try to be transparent about it to those I'm discipling, and I also try to let them know that hey, I'm getting back up. I'm getting back up. I'm getting back up. In the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve, after they took a bit of the apple, they realized that they were naked. So they started to take fig leaves and they covered themselves, and then they hid. They hid out of shame and guilt. So the worst thing we can do when we're trying to disciple someone or even be discipled, we get shame, we get guilty, and we try to hide. So, what I try to do is, have people around me that can actually hold me accountable. My brothers, I'm in a small group, in a life group, and we get really transparent and vulnerable. And instead of hide, we're actually doing the opposite. We're actually confessing to one another our sins, and we're actually trying to like pray for one another, and we're trying to face it right there. So I think that's the hardest part, just making sure that you're ready to face things on a daily basis. Whether hey, I got in a fight with my wife. Hey, am I ready to like go face it and tell my brothers? All these different things that like we're trying to do is like, am I really like living this life and I'm really like face these things? Facing things is hard. Being vulnerable is hard. But we get our strength from the Lord.
Very nice message, Mr. Jonathan. Very well said. Very well said. Can you share a practical ways churches can create a stronger culture of discipleship?
Oh man, I think there's a lot of ways, because how I see the church is as a body, the body of Christ. How I see things like church, right? It's like hospital, so people come, the sick can come, the lame can come. We can all come here, and everyone can get what they need. They can get treated, and we should be able to love them where we're at when we're there. So I think churches we can do a better job at like being open, when people are coming, regardless of what they look like, what their creed they are, what religion they are part of at the time. They should be able to come here and feel love regardless. They should not feel judged. So I think creating an atmosphere of love is like the biggest thing that we can do. And as a church body, no matter where you go, you should be able to feel loved. I think the next part is like we shouldn't be isolating from one another. I think churches, we should be having events, we should be doing, different things to be able to come together as a body and celebrate and worship the Lord. I think that's a huge part. So creating an atmosphere of love, having events and having opportunities outside of Sundays for us to come together and actually study and like worship, via Bible studies, small groups, life groups, and making sure that everyone at the church feels like they have a place. That this isn't just like the pastor's church on the corner, but everyone has a place here that they can go, that they can be vulnerable, that they can feel love, that they can ask for help, that they can ask for prayer with. I think that those are the three biggest things that we can do as a church.
Mr. Jonathan, let's talk about the broader impact of discipleship. How does genuine discipleship impact families, communities, or even nations?
Wow, that's a really good question, Daniel. One of the theologians that I like follow, his name is Dr. Tony Evans, and he's based out of Texas, Houston, Texas. Well, somewhere in Texas, and he has a huge church there. But he has a principle called the kingdom principle, and he talks about the kingdom man. The kingdom man impacts the household, and the Barnum Institute did a study that did over 90% of the family will come to Christ if the man does. It's usually around like 30% if the wife or the woman does. Not saying that they're less than, but it's a huge impact on the family when the husband is going to church, he's a practicing Christian, he's giving his life to Christ. More than likely, your family will follow suit. And for me, it's like, all right, if the family follows suit, okay, then the local church is impacted because you have a whole bunch of families that are like being Christ-like as possible. They're impacting the church. The church is impacting the city is impacting the country, and the country is impacting the world. And that's how we really make disciples of all men. No matter where we go, we're making a change right where we're at. We're showing people Christ like love right where we're at, and it starts in the house, in the home. And specifically us as men, we need to be have a relationship with Christ. We need to be in our word. We need to be doing these things to impact our families. Our families impact the local church. Our local church impacts the bigger city. The city impacts the county impacts the United States or wherever country you're at, and the country impacts the world. So I think that's the broader impact of this thing we call discipleship in the Christian faith.
Very well said, Mr. Jonathan. In today's busy world, how can believers prioritize discipleship without feeling overwhelmed?
Man, that's a really good question because it's super easy. I know my wife, she's a part of multiple different small groups, Bible studies, and it really is a lot, when it comes to like service and things like that. But I think that just getting really intentional, even if you can get into a small group and you're being vulnerable about that small group or that life group, and you're like, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it every Thursday, but I can come every other Thursday. So just setting realistic goals, realistic expectation for yourself, and how you can continue to you put yourself in a situation to have discipleship. So we can't just sit around and like not do anything because we're busy. Even if it's monthly, even if it's quarterly, make time to go meet with that person that you're discipling or you're beginning discipleship. Ask for the time, ask for the chances, ask for those things, that you're looking for, and being transparent with your brothers and sisters in Christ. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do.
Mr. Jonathan, as a podcast host, what is your short term and long term goals?
Oh man, yeah. Thanks for asking that. Yeah, so my podcast is called like For the Masses podcast. It's a Christian based podcast. We're designed to spread righteousness. The message of Jesus Christ via testimonies. Ultimately, I started the podcast. In the beginning for selfish reasons. A way for myself to put my thoughts somewhere, to have something collective, like kind of how musicians have their album. I wanted that for myself. And if it decided to make money, that would be also be something nice, just to be out there, to be seen. And eventually my wife said, John, you should spread righteousness. So the podcast evolved to, strictly like spreading righteousness, trying to, help disciple people, help to, make followers of Christ. And then ultimately if it blows up and it can sustain us in a different way, and that's God's will, I would love that, podcasting full time, podcasting, and just like traveling the country, traveling the world, getting testimonies from people, spreading the gospel, and just like, edifying the body. And, I think that that would be the end goal for sure. What about you?
Indeed, Mr. Jonathan. And what would be my advice for someone who feels unqualified to discipline others?
Yeah, I meet a lot of people that feel like they're unqualified to do a lot of things, but we throughout the Bible we see so many different believers that like ended up making huge impacts for the body, and the one that's coming to mind right now is Moses. When God asked Moses to go to Pharaoh and to let his people go, Moses is like, "Who, me? I'm a shepherd." And Moses was, he was shepherding for almost like 40 years. And he's like, you want me? I stutter. He had a huge stutter. And you want me to go to this Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go? He's like, no way. And God showed him through signs that he can do it, that he can do it. And not only that, God said, hey, your brother Aaron, he'll be with you. He'll be your speaker. He'll be your mouthpiece, kind of like you are for me, Moses. And so I think, if we're feeling unqualified, let's, hey, pray and ask God to get that out of our heart, the unqualified, and to qualify us, to make us better, to make us, be able to do the things that God is asking us to do. And I think that's part of the journey, you know and then also, God brings other people around us. Like I said, Jesus had 12, and then he had that close inner circle of three, and I think it's super important for the community aspect of it. But God qualifies us for sure. We just have to ask him.
Yes, ask and you will be answer. So you thank you for your advice, Mr. Jonathan, as well as good luck to your goals. And you're asking me if or what are my goals as a podcaster. Well, this is my hobby. This is my passion. So even I have lots things to do, I make sure that I will create something that empower
Amen.
people all over the world. I have a lot of podcasts maintaining every week. So my short-term and long-term goals to empower people all over the world in each podcast that I'm creating. So Mr. Jonathan, if you could leave listeners with one key truth about discipleship, what would it be?
Yeah, I would tell them to, know who Jesus is. He created all these disciples, thousands and thousands of years later. Know who Jesus Christ is, and if you're having a hard time, you're having a rough time, really know who Jesus is. Go to your local churches, ask them who Jesus is, and they'll be happy to tell you, and they'll pray for you, and then also just like get into your Bible, start like really, really, really like understanding, hey, what our God is, what who Jesus is, what this life is about, before you go and try to disciple someone, or even, hey, being transparent with the person you're discipling, like, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm trying to learn this thing. Can we do it together? And you guys pray together and you do those things together. So I would definitely like find out who Jesus is.
Mr. Jonathan, how does discipleship differ from a simply attending church or participating in religious activities?
Yeah, so I think, going to church, is a good spiritual discipline. I think it's a good discipline to go and be around believers, and it's good to like go and worship with the body and things like that. But we have this thing in our faith called the Great Commission, and we're in Matthew 28:18-20. We were called go and make disciples of all nations. So that's what we're called to do. Acts 1:8 says, "You will be my witness to the ends of the earth." And I think that that's probably more important, one of our Christian like tendencies, making discipleships, being in community so that we can, really, really, really continue to grow the kingdom that way. I think that when we're just going to church, and, and you're not helping anyone, are we really, doing what we're called to do if we're just doing that?
Before we wrap up our discussion today, Mr. Jonathan, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already on fifth season, abstract poetry on second season, book 101 review in its fifth season as well, comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in its fifth season too, geography 101 and love letters in its third season, and my baby podcast, mental health 101. Movie 101 review and Music 101 in its fifth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its fifth of second season, people. So please do listen my all my podcasts wherever you listen your podcasts. So Mr. Jonathan, how do you think technology and online platforms are influencing modern discipleship?
Oh man, it makes it even cooler because there's a church called 2819. They're pretty popular right now. They talk about their small groups and the people who watch their church online. They call them digital disciples. So it's like you literally can get discipleship from home now. Some in some cases you're talking to other people, in some cases you're not. But it's super cool because like you're really like can be on different parts of the world, like you and I, Daniel. But you can really get discipled even through the screen. So I think it's amazing. I think that there's something to say about being in person.
Mm.
However, I do think that like if you can't do that, or you're feeling like something's holding you back from doing it in person, and while you look for a church, there's a lot of ways to get online, look at sermons, and to reach out to people, and just to ask for prayer through different platforms like Instagram, or email, and just like getting discipled that way as well. I think it's a plus for sure.
Mr. Jonathan Barrett, thank you so much for empowering us. Thank you so much for your empowering knowledge that you impart to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast itself?
Yeah, thanks, bro. Yeah, you can find the podcast anywhere. My podcast as at For the Masses podcast on all platforms. Please support if you're looking for a Christian podcast that shares a lot of testimonies from Christians really like walking this walk. Definitely go take a listen.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Jonathan Barrett, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering episodes to come. So, Mr. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.